Erin R. Lange graduated from the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University in 2008 with a concentration in music education. She completed her MAT in Secondary Social Sciences from Towson University in 2012. Ms. Lange is currently a social studies teacher in the Arundel County Public Schools. These are her reflections.
Mrs. Lange, thank you so much for coming in on a Saturday and sharing with us your preparation to become a teacher and your career to date in education. We are in the process of trying to document the development and evolution of teacher education at Towson, and your interview will help us do that in a richer fashion. A good place to begin always is in the beginning, and if you would you share with us a little bit about your early social context, where you grew up, what you were thinking about as you went through school, and what you thought possibly in terms of a career choice.
Oh, I moved around a lot as a child. Was born in Pittsburgh, which is not popular around here now. Quickly moved to Salt Lake City, Chicago for my elementary school career. And then in middle and high school, I spent most of my time in Orchard Park, New York, which is outside Buffalo. And then finally, my sophomore year of high school, moved to Hershey, Pennsylvania. And that whole time, I thought I wanted to be a teacher.
Really?
Oh, yes. My best friend and I, I want to say 3rd or 4th grade, made a preschool in my basement over the summer for all the neighborhood kids, because obviously that's what they want to do with their summer. So I always thought I wanted to be a teacher until I moved to Orchard Park and really got involved in music. And then when we moved to Hershey, I got much more involved in music and started to think that perhaps that could be a career choice for me instead. But music and teaching had always been in the back of my mind. In fact, in high school at Hershey, I interned with the choir director for 2 years. I spent 4 periods a day in his classroom my senior year of high school, and I taught 4 of his classes.
And what were you teaching?
I taught a women's choir and a concert choir, and then piano and guitar. So he slowly let me take over those classes as my junior and then senior years of high school progressed.
My heavens. So you got started very early on.
Yes.
So when you were looking for colleges, were you looking for music schools or teaching institutions or maybe a combination of both?
Much to my parents' chagrin, I was looking mainly at performing schools.
I see.
I had a couple backups. I was in Pennsylvania, so Penn State and Temple were my backups as liberal arts colleges. But I applied to 9 different music conservatories on the eastern seaboard, all up and down. And ended up picking Peabody because of its proximity to my family. I have a much younger brother and wanted to be able to get home to see him. And just the reputation of Peabody being the oldest conservatory in the country and having such a strong voice program.
So you came to Peabody, and tell us a little bit about that experience and what your coursework entailed.
Peabody is a music conservatory, so they have very few traditional classroom liberal arts classes. I took a reading class and a writing class. Everything else for your coursework there, in preparation for getting a performance degree, is in music. So 4 years of music theory, 3 years of music history, 2 years of ear training and sight singing, and then opera classes, stage movement classes, everything having to do with being on the stage or preparing to be on the stage.
And I'm sure at some point you start to do performing.
Yes.
When does that happen? I'm sort of thinking this paralleling student teaching.
Yes. It depends on what is going on at the school and what potential they see in you. I was very fortunate in that I have a strong acting background outside of music, and so they really saw a lot of potential for me in opera. And so they cast me in some operas my freshman year and sophomore year, which is somewhat unusual for Peabody. But my favorite was our outreach program. We actually got to go into the schools. We did an English version of the Magic Flute, Die Zauberflöte by Mozart, that we called Papageno. So it told the story of this, of the Magic Flute, of this opera, through the eyes of the comedic relief Papageno. And we got to go into all these area schools and perform, and we invited the students up on stage with us. They got to be the fire and water elements when Papageno goes through and Tamino go through their trials. And that was probably my favorite performance opportunity that I had.
So here you are at the end of your schooling, and what are you looking for in terms of employment?
Well, my junior year at Peabody, I got a part-time job as a children's music minister in Bethesda at a church. And it was really there that my focus changed from this very straight and narrow path of I'll finish at Peabody and then I'll go straight to my master's, which is what most vocalists do.
I see.
Because in a vocal program, your voice doesn't mature until your early 30s, so you're not going to be able to immediately start a career. So my plan was to just go straight through that program, the straight and narrow, and then eventually end up on the stage at the Met or the Scala. But then as I started working at this church twice a week, I found myself a little distracted by what I was doing there and became more and more interested in preparing lessons and concerts and just anything having to do with these students, just getting to work with them. And ended up being pulled away from performance. I found that I was more excited about what I was doing with these children than I was with any performance or any preparation or rehearsal. And so I told my voice teacher, I think I want to go into something else. I think I want to be a teacher. I'm not sure teaching what. But at that point, as I said, Peabody is all performance-based, and to switch majors, you have to leave the school. And to go to a then liberal arts school or a teaching school would mean starting from scratch. So a 21-year-old starting as a freshman, and I was not looking forward to that. So I finished up at Peabody and then just started sending my resume out there. I actually applied to a certification program through Penn State, that being my go-to. And then I just sent my resumes everywhere in Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, just hoping that maybe a private school would want to hire me if I didn't get into the Penn State certification program, which I did get into. And I was looking at apartments when I got a call from Chapelgate Christian Academy, which is in Marriottsville, Maryland, in Howard County. And they wanted to interview me for a choir director position. I was very excited about that. I ended up turning down Penn State. And then I didn't hear from Chapelgate after that interview for 2 months.
Oh, no.
And in the meantime, I got an apartment in Pigtown down in Baltimore City with a friend who was going through his internship at Peabody. He was a double major in bassoon performance and music ed. And then in late August, I got a call back from Chapelgate saying that the position was still open and they were still very interested, and could I come interview again but bring other things that I could teach because it wasn't going to be a full-time position. So could I teach other subjects to fill out my schedule?
Okay.
So I was hired the week before school started.
Oh, my.
And so fresh off of my performance career at Peabody, I was hired as the choir teacher at Chapelgate, and I also taught Bible and world history.
Good grief. That's quite a diverse menu there.
Yes.
And not having had any kind of preliminary preparation really to do these things, sort of probably, I don't know, what were you pulling from in terms of how do I do this?
A lot of inspiration from good teachers I had in the past. I did take a couple music ed classes at Peabody once I realized that I wanted to be a teacher. They were very rudimentary, mainly based in teaching specifically music, but they did give me at least some element of pedagogy that I could draw from as I kind of flew by the seat of my pants there for the first couple months.
And so how did that year go?
It went fantastically. I really found that teaching is a calling that I have. And it was very natural for me, and I got very involved in everything. I was the de facto music director, but the musical was something that was optional, and I was interested in doing it. The band director was also new that year, and she was not interested. But I had an instrumental music background as well. I played violin for 8 years, and also studied orchestral conducting with Harlan Parker while I was at Peabody. And so I said, I can do this. I can be the pit orchestra director as well. So we did Les Mis my first year. And that was, again, fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing. But that really taught me how enriching it is to get involved in all the extracurriculars as well. So I also became the softball coach and the National Honor Society advisor. And just really got very involved. I was the chapel worship leader. And I found that the students were what made everything worth it and what kind of drove whatever I was doing. And I was changing curriculums, which is something that's very freeing, and you're allowed to do at a private school.
Uh-huh.
So I was able to write some of my own curriculum based on the needs I saw in my students. But it was just a wonderful adventure my first year.
I'm sure. Now, what age range are we talking about here, or grade range?
Chapelgate runs from 6th through 12th grade.
I see.
I started working with them in the 7th grade. There was a 7th grade choir, an 8th grade choir, 2 high school choirs. I taught 8th grade Bible, and then the world history class was a 9th grade class.
Uh-huh. So you saw a wide range of students as well as curricula.
Yes.
My heavens. So what are you thinking at the end of that first year?
At the end of my first year, I had begun to realize that perhaps music education was not where I wanted to go, that perhaps more academic setting was where I wanted to be. I found that coming from a very rich background in music and a very high-level background in music, that teaching choir was difficult for me. It was a struggle. I loved my audition choir. It was a 0-period class, so before homeroom, and it was completely worth it to come in that early and work with these students. I loved the musical, but the middle school choirs and that high school choir were a struggle for me because there were students who were taking it because the art teacher was scary and the band director made you buy your instrument. So it was an easy way to get your fine arts credit. But, you know, we have to sing in here. And meanwhile, I was really enjoying the dialogue that we could have in the Bible class and in the history class and what that meant. And so I asked my headmaster if there were other academic classes that I could take on, and I got to expand my schedule a little bit, gave up a planning period to do it, but it was well worth it to pick up those extra sections and really get to work with them on an academic level as well. So that was when I really started to shift my focus away from music and made my headmaster aware that if a position opened up in straight academic teaching, that I would be very interested in taking it.
Uh-huh. What were the additional academic courses that
It was
you...
all still world history
I
and
see.
Bible. I just got to take on more of an active role rather than being that secondary teacher
I
who
see.
was just coming in and filling in the role.
So did that happen there at Chapelgate, that you had an almost exclusively academic?
It didn't. Actually, I was still teaching all the choirs. I had more academic classes my second year. And at the end of my second year, one of the Bible teachers was leaving. And so I went through a very rigorous interview process to become the full-time Bible teacher. And about that time, the economy was really taking a turn. They were looking at numbers, and because I was primarily hired as the music teacher, they excised my position. And so I ended up having to leave Chapelgate.
Too bad. Really was. 'Cause you... So what do you do?
It's a good question. I had just gotten engaged, and I had always been talking about I need to go back and get my master's. I definitely know that this is what I want to do with my life. And to have more job security, have some more training in this, I need to go back and get my master's. And so it was kind of the push I needed, really. I'm thankful for the opportunity that I was forced to leave Chapelgate because I was very comfortable there. I loved working there. But it meant that I was never going to go back and get my master's, because to do that would mean taking off for the internship portion. I'd contacted lots of schools in the areas, and they all told me the same thing. You can do your coursework through us, but then once that internship comes, you're going to have to stop teaching. So that forced my hand, and I applied to Towson exclusively. I actually didn't know the area all that well. I had never thought that I would end up staying in Maryland, as evidenced by the fact that I kept applying to Penn State. But my husband is a Harford County native. His mom and dad both grew up in Baltimore City, and so his mom really recommended Towson to me as having a rich history in education. And so I was probably the biggest pain in the butt for the MAT program, because I was calling every other week asking about the status of my application and what was going on, and making sure that they understood that, you know, I'm putting all my chickens or all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. And there were a couple problems with my application. It was a very hair-raising summer, but at the end of the summer I was accepted into the one-year program.
Okay.
However, because of my background, I was applying as a social studies teacher, and because of my background in music, they accepted me, but requested that I take 30 credits of undergrad before they would let me start my master's work.
Oh, my heavens.
Yes, which ended up being a good thing for me because Peabody is a very small school, and I never really got the full college experience. And I had the opportunity to choose between some of the community colleges for that coursework or coming here to Towson. And I chose Towson. So I got to have that kind of undergrad experience of taking some of the liberal arts classes that I missed out on in my undergrad.
Right. So what were some of those courses?
I took an Asian history class, which was fascinating. I was called out as the only master's student in this 200 level class. I was in a number of 100 level classes, so with freshmen, including one of my former students, which was awkward for about 2 seconds, and then we got over it. So I took U.S. history.
Of course.
And world, I had taught enough that they excused me from it.
Right.
I took economics, which was the first time I caught wind of the fact that as a social studies teacher, I might have to teach economics. I always thought it was a math class until I took it. So it was things like that that really opened my eyes to what all I was getting myself into.
So after those, so you did those first.
Yes.
Those were prerequisites to the program.
Exactly.
And were you still thinking this was a good idea?
I was really excited about it. And the more I got to know the school, the more I was excited about it and really looking forward to getting involved in the master's program. I met a number of the faculty members, both in the education school and just in the liberal arts school. And some of the psychology classes I took especially were just fascinating and made me really want to get involved more. So I am thankful for it. They were also very flexible with me. I had to take off 2 weeks in the spring semester to get married, which was fascinating for teachers or professors of 100 level classes, their student getting married. But everyone was very accommodating and very supportive. So I was looking forward to it.
So then you start, and the one-year program you start in the summer?
Yes, and it is very intensive.
So what happens in the summer? Is that a bunch of courses or one course or?
You take 2 courses for one part of the summer and then an additional 2 courses for the second part.
Whoa.
And you're cohorted. So I believe we started with 15 students in our cohort of secondary ed one-year program. And it was very much, I don't want to equate it to going into battle or anything, but often it felt like that. We were together in a classroom for 8 hours a day, 4 days a week. All of us were coming from very diverse backgrounds. We had a gentleman who was a lawyer, and he retired and realized he really wanted to be in the classroom and teach. So after he retired as a lawyer, he came back. We had people that were political science majors that thought they wanted to go into politics and change their minds. So it was really fascinating, and it was a wonderful experience to get to know these people very quickly and really support each other. We always joked around that we'd spend 8 hours a day in the classroom and then get home and immediately sign on to Facebook where we had a group, and we'd immediately be like, okay, we have this assignment going on. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I don't know what I'm doing. Somebody help me. So we really helped each other through that, and it was marvelous getting to be that close with people that are like-minded about what they want to do with their lives.
And then you start the fall semester, but it's my understanding that you really don't start with everybody else, or that you are more in tune to the public schools calendar than with the universities.
Yes, which was somewhat of a struggle for us to understand that some of these people that we had seen all summer taking classes now are following a different schedule than us. But it was great getting into the classroom because the summer program is very theoretical. You're doing a lot of that early pedagogical curriculum and development things, which is absolutely necessary. But for a lot of these people, I was one of the only ones that had any classroom experience. I believe we had 2 people that substitute taught prior to this program. So a lot of them were experiencing these hypothetical situations, not really understanding what was before them or what they're really talking about.
Right.
But we needed that early theory to build that foundation for the fall. And in the fall, we did 2 days a week in the classroom. You could do more if you wanted. And then we had classes that we still took here. So we were commuting back and forth depending on the day.
And so you elected to do secondary education social studies.
Correct.
And did that put you then in a high school or a middle school setting right away?
Once we got through that summer program, yes. So the summer classes, we had not had an opportunity to get into the classroom yet.
Right.
But once we got into the fall, we were all placed in either a high school or a middle school. And that was the first time we were separated since we had started this program. It was very
So there was some
bittersweet.
separation anxiety there, no
little bit.
doubt.
But a very good experience to get everybody into the classroom. I ended up in Arundel County at North County High School, which was very different than anything I had experienced at the private school, and was a rude awakening for me as to what I was.
Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So North County is right on the border with, it's in Glen Burnie, so on the border with Baltimore City. You have some students that are sneaking into the district from Baltimore City. And so it's a very diverse school. And it was something I had not experienced. My population at Chapelgate that I was dealing with were all somewhat privileged students. A large portion of them were foreign exchange students from Korea. But I had never experienced such a diverse range of students, and some of whom didn't necessarily want to be there. And so it was definitely a challenge to have to find ways to engage this completely diverse range of students before me, especially in classes that they maybe weren't interested in. We started in world history with the Middle Ages, and you know, what 16-year-old wants to learn about the Middle Ages? And so it was definitely a wake-up call to me as to what I was in for, but it was what I needed, because I definitely realized that I had been very sheltered at Chapelgate, in some good ways, but in some not so great ways, because I realized through my experiences at North County and then subsequently at Brooklyn Park Middle School that there were students that needed my help in far more enriching ways than just teaching them some curriculum about world history.
So that first semester you said you were in classrooms maybe twice a week?
Unless you could volunteer for more.
Right. Well, given your schedule.
It was very challenging.
It would be hard to find any more time that you could volunteer.
Yes.
So after the fall, then you're going to be full-time in a teaching role? Or is that, do you gradually go into that? Or?
Well, the fall is used to gradually bring you into a full teaching role.
I see.
So you begin observing, or in my case, because I had a background in the classroom, my mentor teacher allowed me to get much more involved much earlier. But that's used to gradually build your confidence in the classroom. You do 2 intensive teaching experiences where you are excused from classes here on campus in order to be there for a full week and take ownership of a whole unit. So gradually getting you prepared for that spring semester when you're there 5 days a week.
And were you in 2 different settings in the fall? Did you do the high school setting and a middle school in fall?
No, for the secondary ed program here, it's different than the early childhood and the elementary ed. So secondary ed, it's broken up into 4 blocks, 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. However, those 3 blocks at the beginning are all on your first placement.
I see.
So you spend your whole fall and then your first half of spring at one placement and then transfer to your second.
So you stayed then, and were you working with the same students then?
For the most part, Arundel County works on a semester schedule, and so at the semester switch, you may get some new students, but you may keep some of your old students as well. So it was some consistency, but some new students as well.
But that's a nice transition that you're familiar with the setting and pretty much with the students as well.
Exactly.
And how was being in charge?
It was a lot of fun. It was challenging in a good way. I've always said that I'm thankful that I got placed in Anne Arundel County, coming from a private school background, because there are some challenges in Anne Arundel County, especially in the schools that Towson has a relationship with. And so it was challenging, but in a way that forced me to grow as a teacher and left me so much better prepared for whatever lies ahead. I was ready to take on the world when I finished. But it was great being in charge. And I got to be very involved. I got involved with the musical at North County. I created a literacy program as part of my service project for students that were encouraged into advanced placement courses but didn't have the skill set to be there. So I worked with them during lunches on reading and writing skills.
And then you did a short placement at the middle school level.
Yes, at Brooklyn Park Middle.
And what did you teach there?
I taught 6th grade. I specifically requested 6th grade since at Chapelgate it was the one grade that I did not have frequent access to.
And tell us about that.
I ended up actually, my mentor teacher was the cousin of my first mentor teacher. So that was a lot of fun. Brooklyn Park Middle is also a very diverse school. You have a lot of students coming from the culture of poverty, a lot sneaking in from the city line. We had one student who was actually targeted by a gang. And while that was frightening, it was, again, excellent preparation. It was something that I'm thankful that I was able to be involved in mentoring this young person.
And this is a 6th grader?
Yes. And there we taught world, and I got to teach South African apartheid and South America were the 2 units that I got to be a part of there. And that was even more challenging. It was an inclusion classroom that I got to be involved in. So we had students from the FLS program that were part of our classroom 2 periods a day, as well as a lot of students that had IEPs and 504s. And so that really got to expose me to a lot of what's going on in education.
And here you are at the end of a very, very hectic spring. And what are you thinking of in terms of employment?
I was actually really torn because I live up in northern Baltimore County, but after being in Arundel County for a year and seeing the program that they had running there, I was also very interested in applying in Arundel County, and I had built some wonderful relationships there. But I definitely knew that I wanted to be at the public school level after that. That was always a question that was asked of me was, after you're done here, are you going to go back to private school? And because of the students that I met through this program and through interning, I realized that I definitely was being called to public education, as challenging as it is. And so I applied to, I want to say 5 counties, especially social studies education is somewhat poo-pooed right now with the focus on STEM. And a lot of people warned us social studies people that you were going to have a big challenge ahead of you getting a job. But I had built a relationship with the social studies coordinator in Arundel County, largely because of people like Dave Watts, my coordinator through the internship. And so Ms. Poisson at the board in Arundel County already had my name on file. She had already pre-interviewed me. And so I kept in touch with her over the summer, a very stressful summer, hoping I was going to get a job. And in July, she emailed me and said, you need to email Sharon Stratton at Arundel High School right now. Email her today. Email her your resume. And so I did and got an interview with Sharon. I also actually had an interview with a middle school in Baltimore County around the same time, but was very impressed with Arundel and was actually offered the job in Baltimore County and called up Sharon and said, I have this on the table. I really want to be a Wildcat, which is the Arundel Wildcats. And she said, you know, can you hold on through the weekend, and called me after the weekend and offered me the position of a social studies teacher at Arundel High School.
Wonderful.
Yes.
That turned out very well.
Yes.
So, you know, well, this is good, though. You know by July that where you're going to be, because sometimes this happens the week before school starts.
As I learned, yes.
So you had an opportunity then to talk with people before the school year started, or?
I did. I got to go in to the school. I was very excited about the fact that I was getting a classroom. I was a little worried I was going to be floating. And so I went in and got to meet some of the APs, the assistant principals at Arundel, and they gave me a tour, showed me my classroom. I got to meet my department chair and really start to make myself at home before the school year even started.
Well, tell us about that first year.
Arundel is a very challenging high school to teach at, not because of the population. We do have a very diverse population, but because Sharon Stratton, our current principal, demands excellence from her faculty. And it's one of the things that really drew me to Arundel. She's a very innovative principal. She instituted an hour lunch called Wildcat Hour, in which the students get 2 halves. Teachers are assigned a half. They have to be open for students for remediation, for extra teaching, for whatever the students need. And the other half, teachers eat lunch, and the students get to choose which half they eat lunch. And it was all just student-driven, and that's what really drew me there. So it was challenging in its own way, but a wonderful experience getting to be in the classroom. I taught Honors World History, which was something I had taught during my internship year, as well as at the private school. but I also taught U.S. government, both a standard class and a co-taught class, which was the first time that I had truly been a part of a co-teaching model outside of Brooklyn Park Middle, which was not true co-teaching. We just had an inclusion classroom, so the students were dropped off in our room. And so that was a whole new level for me, getting to share my classroom and work with a wonderful special educator. And so we had some very diverse students, but I had great classes. And I got to be involved in the swim team that year. They had a desperate need for a swim coach, and so I volunteered. And just got really involved there, just like I did at Chapelgate, because I knew that that was what was going to make this the most enriching experience possible.
And what do you think was the most difficult thing about your first year in public ed?
All the extra work. It's something that they warned me about in the internship year, but there's a lot of things that as an intern you just can't do. There are IEP meetings you can't go to. There's all the paperwork that you have to fill out that you just can't as an intern. And so that was probably the most challenging thing for me that first year, was the constant demand for an email for, we need a teacher for a 504 meeting, you need to be here. Quarterly report time, we need your assessment of all of your students who have a 504 IEP. And for me as a co-teaching teacher, that was a lot of students.
Yes.
So all those extra little demands were what was most difficult for me to adjust to at a public school.
Right, and that certainly was different than your private school setting.
Yes.
Even the curriculum is more prescribed, I think,
Yes.
in a public school setting.
But the great thing about the Maryland model, which I wasn't used to when I moved here from Pennsylvania, is that we have such large counties. In Pennsylvania, a district is maybe 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school. And so coming here and seeing that larger county is your district model was surprising to me, but ended up being quite a strength, because all of your curriculum is written at the board. It's written by teachers over the summer. And then it's sent to, in Arundel County, we have 12 high schools. So all 12 high schools are working off of the same curriculum, the same pre and post test, which on the surface could be construed as somewhat limiting, but it ends up being quite a strength, because you're well prepared. You have differentiated instruction written into your curriculum. You have all kinds of instructional ideas, and you have your pre and post test all written out for you.
So you know what's coming.
Exactly.
And then you get to use your creative talent to present that in a way that is good for the students you're working with.
Exactly.
And what were the highlights? As I always say, what were your rewards that first year?
The students, working with these wonderful students. And some of them weren't the ones that you would necessarily walk into a classroom and say, that's the one that makes it worth it every day. Because some of them they tested me, but made me a better teacher in the end. And I could see their growth and see where I was helping to mold their future. And that's really the ultimate reward of being a teacher, is knowing that you're touching lives at the end of the day.
Yep, absolutely. So where are you now in your professional development and career, and what kinds of things do you see down the road?
I'm still at Arundel High School. It's my second year here. I am teaching AP Government and Seminar, and AVID, which was a new one for me.
AVID?
AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. It's a program for students that are identified as having tremendous potential, but perhaps not the skills to get them to that next level. So they're the academic middle that need that extra boost. And so I get to work with those students on organization, on professionalism, on advocating for themselves, which is something that frustrated me my first year, seeing some of these students in special education who didn't know how to advocate for themselves, or even students not in special ed that just didn't know how to communicate with the teacher, and maybe built a rocky relationship with the teacher because of the way that they had spoken to them. So that's a great opportunity for me in AVID to talk to students about, okay, how are you going to approach this teacher to talk about this issue you have? How are you going to advocate for yourself? So I teach AP Sem, AP Gov, and AVID. Next semester I'll take on Honors Comparative Religions as well, which was a class I took on last year but wasn't able to run because of the numbers. So this year we have 60 signed up.
Oh my heavens.
Yes, so I'm very excited about that. I'm the swim coach again this year, but in addition, I actually have just accepted the position of our drama director at Arundel High School. So I will be running the drama department now and probably taking on the theater classes next year.
Okay, wait. You're moving too quickly for me. So that takes you out of social studies?
Not necessarily.
No.
So theater classes, there's 3 of them that run. So I would be a
see.
split between social studies and theater or AVID. We're not quite sure yet. It's a community effort trying to figure out how this is all going to work,
Of
because
course.
I have such a diverse range of skills and classes that I teach. So it really is still a work in progress. But when they asked me to do it, I jumped at the opportunity to meet some new students and work with them on a different level.
And what does this drama person do?
I'll be running a fall drama, a spring musical, and an improv program.
Okay. And you already know this, and this is for next year?
The drama teacher is leaving at the end of this
Calendar year?
Calendar year, yes. So I'll be taking over in January.
Oh, okay.
Yes, which is why it's all still very organically
I guess so, 'cause
developing.
here we are, middle of November.
Yes.
And whoa, so this is going to be sort of a quick turnaround on getting up for all of these things. So then you're only going to be responsible then for a spring musical.
Yes.
And do you know what this is going to be yet, or?
It'll be Beauty and the Beast, which was chosen before I came onto the program, but I'm very excited. It's one I haven't done before, but I love it, so I'm very excited about it.
Absolutely. My heavens. And nobody's pulled at your sleeve and said, you'd be a really good, I don't know, AP or...
I don't think anybody would say that to me at Arundel, because they don't want me to leave. I'm doing too much for them now. But I actually, back when I was doing my internship, talked to Dave Watts and said, someday I want to do what you're doing. I want to be able to teach teachers how to teach and to help them on this path that I've been on. So I honestly don't know where I'll be. Every couple of months I think about, okay, where am I going to be next year? Am I going to apply? I definitely want to get my doctorate at some point. But in what? I don't know. It changes. It's the flavor of the month, so to speak. But as much as I love the classroom and I loathe the idea of leaving my students, I do wonder what is next. I honestly don't know. But I'm kind of taking it every day as it is.
Sure, of course. Well, you have a long time to
Yes.
contemplate this. But those are usually 2 areas where teachers get pulled out of classrooms, is especially to go into some level of administration. So you have to be aware that probably will be coming your way as well.
I'm sure. Arundel Anne Arundel County has a Right Start program. So it's teachers that are in the county give up their teaching position for 4 years to advise new teachers coming into the district. And so that may be in my future at some point once I'm tenured. It's an excellent program, and I get to be a part of it, even though I technically am a 4th-year teacher because of my private school experience. They consider me part of the program anyway. So they mentor you for the first 3 years through your experience in the district.
And one of the things that we do know is that, unfortunately, about half of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. So this program, certainly, I think this program is something that's obviously very necessary and something that school systems, like Anne Arundel, recognize is tremendously important.
Yes.
So I think they would be asking you to be involved in something like that. Well, what kinds of things haven't we talked about that you would like to share with us about either your preparation or your teaching or anything that we've missed?
I'd just say Towson has been wonderful to me, and that they've done a great job of preparing people. When I started with the one-year program, I looked around the classroom at some of these people, some of whom were coming straight out of an undergrad program, others who had been in the workforce for a number of years, and I thought, how are you going to make it in the classroom? As being somebody who had been in the classroom already. And at the end of it, they were all marvelous teachers. So I'd say it's prepared us well.
Good to know. We always ask one last question, and that's, although your experience hasn't been that long, but you did have both private school and public school experience, What kind of wisdom would you share with individuals who are considering teaching as a career?
I would say the first thing is to be patient and flexible. Every day in the classroom is different and new and exciting, and you can plan all you want for it. There's going to be something unexpected every day, and embracing that and realizing the beauty of that is one of the ways that you survive in this profession. Because as you said, a lot of people do leave. A lot of people don't realize just how challenging it is. And it is challenging. And you have to protect yourself so that you don't burn out. Because it's very easy as somebody called into teaching to give yourself 115% and to realize that there's nothing left of yourself at the end of the day. So being flexible and just having that sense of humor, and to always just remember why you were called into the classroom. Every time that I had a bad day and would get on the computer and start looking at, okay, do I want to stay in teaching? What else is out there?
Sure.
And I'd look at some of these other jobs and I'd think, do I want to never see my students again? Could I just walk away from their faces? And the answer ultimately is no. So just remembering that that's why you're there ultimately is what keeps me in the classroom every day, and I think what keeps anybody in the classroom every day that stays in this profession.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this for us.